Hey everyone, in this video what we're going to be covering is doing the styling for our A tags within the menu. The reason we're going to be doing the designing of it prior to doing the actual hyperlinking is we're going to take the rationale of if we create all the styles and rules we need for our first page, we can use that as a template that we can later apply to our other pages, meaning we can duplicate our index page to other different named pages, and we can apply the same styling, save a lot of time, just a little more efficient. So you can see I added a little bit of extra text in the second link, and the reason for this is obviously your links on your page will be different lengths depending on what words you use, and this will be a good example to show how we can make them equally distant apart from one another, so a longer link doesn't necessarily eat up more real estate than the other. So just to recap from last video, you can remember we labeled them all with the same class. This way we can apply a class rule to all A tags and change every single one of them at once. So go ahead and type in period link to signify we're calling the class of link. And we'll do our curly brackets. So you just start with shift and then hold the square brackets, which will make those. And just by default, it creates the right-hand side one too. And within inside of there, what we are going to do first is we want to define a width of our links. And we'll go down to width. And let's say, 125 pixels. That's a good size. And I just want to give you some context here when we do that. If we do width of 125 pixels, it's not going to do anything because we still have to apply a few more rules for this to make sense. Before this will work, we need to define also where these links are going to float. That is what will define the height property to work. So since it's on the right hand side, we're going to allow these objects to float on the right too. Go ahead and press right, add that semicolon, we'll press save, we'll click the design view and then back, and now you can see that they are spaced apart. Thing is, though, they don't look very aligned with one another because what we need to do next is align the text. So we're going to do the text align rule right here. And we want it to be centered. That way it's just nicely placed inside of that 125 pixel tag we have. And when we press save, we go back and forth. We can see now that they're much nicer spaced together. And even though this text is longer, it has its own equal real estate that the others do. Just to add a little bit of definition to these links we have here, why don't we add a border on the left-hand side? That way we can add some separation between the two. So to do that, we're just going to go ahead and add a semicolon to our last rule. And we're going to type in BOR. You'll start seeing that it's populating suggestions. We want the border left. We want it only to be 1 pixel. We want it solid. And I'm just going to pick gray for now for ease. And maybe slightly lighter, just so it's viewable, but not too viewable. We'll go ahead and press Control S to save. Click here. Click out. And now you can see we're starting to have a nice separation between the links as well as the header that it's placed within. But you can see that the first link is slightly larger. And this is something that you do in coding on an often basis, is you have to modify it. And since we have already defined the width of these objects and we don't need that extra padding here, we go back to that menu class we worked on last lab, and we're going to comment out this right rule. By holding Control and pressing backslash again, we're just saying we don't need that rule anymore. We'll save. Go back and forth, and now, what we actually need to do there is rather than saying it right off, we need to go right 0 pixels. And then when we go ahead and do that, you can see that they're equally spaced. This is another good thing to notice, that the spacing is still a tad small. So if we go to say 145, save, go back and forth, the spacing's a little more clean, that we can have some definition that the text isn't directly in line with the border. Our next few things we need to cover is we need to get rid of the underline here, and that's defined by text decoration. So if we type in text again and decoration, we don't need any. Once we do that, save, go back and forth, it's starting to look a little more like a modern link as opposed to older traditional ones. And I'm going to make the color of the link similar to the color of the dummy logo I did there. So we define the color rule. Again, that's how you define the color. And make sure we add our semicolons or it won't activate as a CSS rule. And I'm going to do the color picker because I want the exact color of that. That's where we can use this dabber tool and select that exact color. Press enter. And now you can see that the colors match each other. We're going to add one more rule to our link because this is what's going to allow us to add some additional smooth stylings to our page. And that one is transition, which essentially means how do you want this rule to interact with other rules, which will be the hover rule we create later. And we want it to ease in and out, and we want it to be 0.5 seconds. So transition is a rule where you can chain multiple rules together, similar to border left. Go ahead and add that semicolon. And this is what we will toggle on and off afterwards to give context. But it's going to directly benefit our link rule here. Now what we're going to do is create another rule on the link class, but it's going to be slightly different. And to do that, we are going to do dot link colon hover. And that's how you can chain an additional rule on top of the class. And you can do this hover rule on not just classes, but tags and even IDs. And what we're going to do here is define the background. So we want to do background. We'll pick a color, and I'm just going to do a slightly darker gray for context. And we're going to go ahead and press save. And when you can see this transition rule allows these links to have this certain level of interactivity to them. When you hover over, they change color ever so slightly. Now the color gray is obviously not a right choice, but it's just to give context. Because if I were to disable this rule, press save and go back and forth, it's very clunky feeling, right? It's that kind of static change. Whereas if we change it back, maybe let's go to 1 second, see how that looks. And pick something maybe a little more complementary, just an ever so darker gray. And save. Saving there again. You have some slight contrast. And just for context too, you can do this with other rules. For example, your color of your text. We could go to black. And by no means am I endorsing these color combinations, just showing functionality. You can have a very slight transition there as well. And there are so much more rules that you can apply with the hover as well as this transition. But this is again just giving you that nice context of making this feel a little more fluid as you interact with it. And when we preview this in Google Chrome, you can see now that you can have that nice kind of interactive feel. Now we'll build on this and make it a little more clean in terms of styling, but this is a good starter to show really how you can modify traditional A tags to not only look slightly different, but have a certain level of interactivity to them.